Okay, sorry. Lori will beat me if I don't record this properly. So it's being recorded now. Anybody interested in the ASSP volunteer board, we would love to have you. We're hoping that opportunities arise real quickly, such as the events that we're having. We are hoping to have a clay shoot and golf tournament around April or May. Right now, we can hope that it goes on. So if anybody wants to help with that, that would be wonderful. We're having a trivia event in February, assuming again that the COVID rules change a little bit. So we'll keep you updated on what's going on. So there's new opportunities on the Colorado job boards. Please check out the board for new opportunities in the Colorado area. We want to make sure that everybody who may have lost a job during this past year, the economy. Sorry, did anybody say something? Nope. We want to make sure that everybody has an opportunity. If you have any job openings in your groups, please let us know. You can send me or any of the board an email and we will get it up there. We have a temporary administrative position in H&S in my company, and that's going to go on the ASSP board. So please check it out and let anybody know who is not on this call who may need a job. So our next meetings are November 17th. We're having a safety and quality in building information modeling systems. I believe that's a team meeting. However, if you go onto the ASSP Colorado website, you'll see it under events and you can sign up, and we're going to be hosting that as well. Brian Pals has been the one organizing this. We'll put out a little more information as it comes. And December 8th, due to the scheduling, and again, not to mention the COVID, we're working on getting not a panel speaker, a speaker for the meeting that we can have virtually, since we can't have it in person. So I'm getting back to the Zoom meeting so I can see everything. Hold on one second. There we go. Okay, so let me just check. Jennifer, do you see? I have both. Where I currently work, I have both. Okay, so I'm looking. Heather, welcome. Cody. Okay, so hello, lots of COVID exposures. Jacqueline Kimball. Looking for, okay, so Jacqueline Kimball is looking for a safety administrator position. So Jacqueline, send me an email, give me a call. Let's chat. You might find some other opportunities on the job site, on the website, sorry, the jobs website. Whoever is B157151 has an associate in Hunt for a new career. We'll be glad to share if you could send along. Again, go on to our website, the Colorado ASSP chapter, and look under jobs, and that's where the jobs are going to be listed. You can also put your resume in for others to look at. Welcome, Cody. Okay, somebody else must have wrote this. Heather Strong is a safety manager, and she's new to the local chapter. She's not looking for a job. Sounds like she's got a good job with JHL Constructors. Welcome, Heather. Jacqueline, currently enrolled in occupational safety and health at Trinidad State College and worked for 2 years as a specialist. So Craig Roehrs works at Sun Construction, and he's one of our panelists and has 2-month full-time site safety positions opening. So it sounds like they have a temporary safety position opening. So call Craig. Craig, make sure to send me that opportunity so we can put it down on our website. Good. Does ASSP Colorado cover both? No, we don't. There's another Colorado Springs chapter. However, if everything is going virtual, we want the opportunity to have everybody on our call, so we love it. And last is Kelly Keddy. My company has an opening for remote business operations coordinator for safety consultancy. Eileen will send job description for the website. Perfect. And last but not least, Ken Lindberg, who I spoke with yesterday, is a former oil and gas EHS manager. He's looking for a job. So a position, a consulting experience. So I'm going to stop here, continue to write in the chat box. And let's make sure if you need a job or you have a job description, please send it to me and we will get it on the website. Questions, comments, concerns? All right, I'd like to introduce Mr. Jeff Citrone. He's not very well known in the ASSP in Colorado. Yeah, he's probably the best known in Colorado, and we have a great panel that's happening. Did we lose, Jeff, did we lose Kevin?
Um,
I don't see Kevin.
I don't.
However, Kevin, are you still on here? Okay, Kevin is not on here. However, we're going to start. We'll hope he jumps back on. So Jeff, take it away, my friend.
All right, thank you. Welcome, everybody. So we are going to have a panel discussion about injury management in the time of COVID. Just a few things before we get started. We are dealing with typical injuries, normal injuries, injuries revolving around work. We do not want to discuss COVID cases at this time. That would bog us down too much. But you know, we can definitely refer you to people or refer you to websites to help with that if you put that in the chat box. The way we're going to run this, we're going to start with our panelists, have them discuss some of the topics, and then we'll turn it over the last 30 minutes to questions. If you can type your questions in the chat box, I will keep track of those and try and make sure we get all of those answered. So once again, injury management in the time of COVID. In normal times before COVID, you know, proper injury management has been key for companies to, you know, reduce costs, keep employee morale up, keep productivity up. And that injury management typically involves standard procedures and programs that we all deal with. However, COVID most likely has impacted those in a negative way, such as an extreme pressure being put on emergency rooms and urgent care facilities with the COVID response and testing, et cetera, or the inability for companies to follow some of those procedures, like having a manager accompany somebody to one of those urgent care or emergency rooms. With that, I'm going to introduce our panelists. There are three. The first one I'd like to introduce is Craig Roehrs. Craig is a CSP with 20 years of safety experience overseeing, managing, and directing mainly in the construction industry, but has also been on Colorado's OSHA on-site safety and health consultation program and has worked as a risk control advisor in the insurance broker agency side. He is currently the director of safety with Sun Construction and Facility Services. He's been that for 5 years. And he is also serving as the committee chair for ABC Rocky Mountain Safety and Education Committee for Northern Colorado. Welcome, Craig. Second, I'd like to introduce Camille Forte. Camille is the Injury and Prevention Manager at HEI Civil Construction. She's been that for almost a year now. Camille's a certified athletic trainer. Her responsibilities include field checking employees that are experiencing pain or dealing with current or past injuries, and also job coaching all those workers to try and help reduce the risk of injury. She is in charge of handling injuries for HEI from day one through return to work. She's handling their wellness programs and doing some general education to that. Welcome, Camille. Our last panelist is Kevin Lombardo, who is the president and CEO of DORN companies. Kevin, who's been with DORN for 5 years, leads the strategy development and expansion plans for DORN, and oversees DORN's focus on developing and coordinating solutions for injury prevention for clients. So welcome, Kevin. With that, I'd like to turn this over to Craig Roehrs. We're going to have Craig, Camille, and Kevin speak on how COVID has impacted their injury management programs or what they've seen impacts to various injury management programs have been, and some of the solutions that they've come up with, and they're um, dealing and how they're dealing with this in this time. So if we could start, please go ahead, Craig.
Hey, thanks, Jeff. Appreciate the invite to participate as a panelist today. I'm just one of many who, here in Colorado and nationwide, worldwide, actually, who's been struggling with this pandemic. So to say that there were struggles, I think all companies in every line of business were exhibiting struggles. So whenever it came down to injuries, was kind of a trickle down effect. It was kind of a, oh, what now? So I think most of those that are managing injuries in your companies exhibited some of the shutdowns, some of the lockdowns, some of the limitations with access. So our designated medical providers, among with many others. So some of the other groups that have been dialoguing about this have shared some of their trials and hardships with some of the clinics not even being open. If they were open, they were limiting the number of patients that would have been seen, types of services that would have been provided. I'm more of a hands-on type of medical manager, so I'm usually present, escorting, and there as much as I'm able. That wasn't the case, so any additional company representation was, what we found was limited, and usually you have that face-to-face, or at least that immediacy of getting some of the communication, adhering to some of the protocols, and if those have some pretty hands-on approaches, probably have some company-specific protocols. I found some of those were compromised. The designated medical providers had limited staff, so they were kind of on the go. It was a bit of chaos. If it was a significant injury that involved anything deeper with any outside specialist referral, that was also another challenge, getting from one to another. So there was additional screening, additional scheduling time. So what we saw was just a wrench thrown in the one, immediate access, two, the duration of the claim just to be able to get in if you had to schedule an appointment, three, communication, where normally you would have at least some idea. I would normally get some idea of what the diagnosis was going to be leading into medical treatment. Some of that was limited, some of that didn't occur at all, some of that was coming up chasing the tail rather. So those were definite struggles. I heard from some peers around, they were getting recommendations to just go to the emergency room, and then again you have the whole chaos that was happening at the early onset of this COVID within the hospital. So that had its own challenges and struggles. But then even some of the services that even right now, such as like a pulmonary function test, those aren't being offered like they normally would, this being an upper respiratory disease. I'm trying to limit that, who's going to be off-gassing a lot of excessive breath with a pulmonary function test. So some of those things have been limited, other services have been limited, but fortunate some of it's been opening up over the last couple of months. We're kind of seeing a pullback a little bit with an uptick in numbers. But as far as limitations, and struggles, that's what we encountered initially through it. So you want to hold off there or go into the ways that we pivoted afterwards?
You're muted.
Yes. Go ahead and talk about how you particularly pivoted. If we repeat that, that's fine. But yeah, I mean, you have a good 5 to 6 minutes left on your section, Craig.
Okay.
So go ahead.
So something that we at Sun have had in place for a while, but we really leaned on this, was going to as much wellness approach and early intervention approach as much as possible. So, if we got any word, and we started promoting and encouraging this with, with our craft, and and supervisory staff to promote that, with our crews, to say if there's anything nagging or some discomfort, bring that to our attention so that we can, catch this before it becomes something that needs medical treatment and response. So we actually jumped the gun and said, anything that, work related, quasi work related, let's take this from a early intervention standpoint. So we took that to a, soft tissue massage therapy approach, trying to attack that from the wellness and a first aid approach. So if we could get some hands-on and alleviate some of that discomfort. Lori was the brainchild who coordinated this whole panel discussion, Lori Frederick with Balance Biomechanics. So we've been working with Lori for, I'd say 5.5 years so far. And this was something early on. We kind of beta tested that whole process as far as getting an early intervention first aid massage approach to getting some ideas. So how did it occur? What tasks were the workers engaging in? What was their body positioning? What was the pre and post mobility stretch or movement, that was engaged in? What's the hang up? And then, Lori, she's a very outgoing personality and very easy to talk to. So she gained a very high rapport with our personnel really quick. So she got a lot into the personal side of their lives, even to I do a lot of work on the weekends. I sleep on my, I sleep upside down, or I sleep on my neck turned in a pretzel. So she'd just find out some of those quirks and then was able to say, okay, so we got some of those other indicators that are combining with some of the work tasks. Let's see if this will work. And different approaches with kinesio tape. She is a big promoter for rock tape, so that's been good. But then just some ergonomic and body positioning coaching and movement, stretch and coach. That was a lot of what we had. Obviously, if we had any imminent, medical treatment case, so we had to get into the clinics, we went ahead and went that route. But for the most part, we leaned a lot from the soft tissue side, especially, and took a wellness and a first aid approach and engaged on an early intervention, the massage therapy and movement, body position coaching, and some kinesio taping. So accomplishing the same result, which is keeping your guys at work, getting them, back to 100%. Usually they've been 100%, and we've been able to, bypass and eliminate those medical designated medical provider challenges, struggles, and at the same time, we're treating it as if it were a potential injury claim. So we put the notice only in and go about it that route. So if something turned sideways, we had that to lean back on, that safety net. We could always take the traditional medical provider route if needed to. Fortunately, that's been able to nip a lot of things in the bud in that time frame due to that. So it's been a wonderful service and a creative outside the box approach. Maybe not that outside of the box is maybe Camille or Kevin will share, but that's how we've attacked it in this time. So.
Hey, Craig, we have a question from Linda Rowley and Rowley, and if I'm messing up people's names, I'm sorry. However, Camille and Kevin, you can answer, but for employees who are working at home, are you going to their homes to get information or to fill out injury reports? Good question.
Okay. Well, I'll just say in our this mine's short. We haven't had any experience of a remote worker with any indication of discomfort or thing that needed some attention. But if that were the case, it would be a similar approach. I'm not sure specifically how Camille or Kevin have approached that.
So, I mean, I'll go and take that one on. So I do work with HEI Civil here in Colorado, but I also have 2 satellite locations in North Carolina and Texas doing similar construction work. And then I still have all of my office people. So for the most part, how I would tackle that if they were in an office setting is I would just set up more so a telehealth call. We do a FaceTime and just kind of see what's going on, have them going through different ranges of motion, looking at their workspace and making small changes and corrections like that. And then for me, as an athletic trainer, I've got a wonderful site called MedBridge, where I can actually create physical therapy exercises or show them how to do certain stretches, depending on where their case falls, work-related, non-work related. If they're kind of past that first couple weeks of inflammation and they're feeling better, or, you know, if they're kind of stuck. So I just treat it more so telehealth for the most part.
Yeah, and just to, hopefully you can hear me, just to leverage what Camille was just saying. A lot of our clients went remote almost immediately. If they had a plant, their plant shut down, their office people went remote. And so our on-site work kind of dwindled a little bit. And then we were starting to get calls within a month saying, we have some issues at home. So we were able to develop a virtual self-care program, probably similar to what Camille's doing, but a virtual self-care program that was a number of sessions, 20 to 30 minutes, where we actually taught people how to self-massage, how to use things such as a deodorant stick or a tennis ball, things that they have handy to help address those things themselves. And in addition, we would give them the same type of exercises to help them relieve that. In addition, we utilize a third-party software, which is a self-assessment, self-correction ergonomic tool that allows people to answer a bunch of survey questions and get a risk profile back. It gives management a risk profile, but it gives the employee a risk profile and things they could take care of themselves. But then to ask them things like how many monitors to use, what's your body style, all those type of things, to put the risk profile together and give them the solutions, which then they're able to opt into the virtual self-care. So things that they can handle on their own. It's really about, like, you know, if they're in your shop, if they're on the construction site, you give them tools. All you're doing is giving them additional tools to self-correct, self-take care of themselves. And really the key then, which goes beyond maybe what we do and more what Craig and Camille are doing, is checking in with people, even if you're not hearing about their discomfort and pain, because when they work at home, it's a different environment. There's the dog to be walked, there's the kids, there's whatever's going on at home. And so sometimes I think just checking in with them to find out where they're at and what they're, you know, what are some of the things they're facing, even if you don't have all these other tools, just to find out. And then you could take the action as opposed to waiting for them to say, by the way, I'm laid up, I'm not going to be able to participate because my neck, my shoulder, my lower back is. So that's how a lot of our clients have addressed it.
Yeah, it's funny that today we're calling it telehealth. It's interesting. So before the COVID came around, this was over the last 2 years, we did take that same approach, but it was just, hey, let's set up a quick FaceTime call. And through COVID, you know, and it's been very fortunate that, you know, us in the construction industry, we've been deemed essential, supporting critical infrastructure. So we've had work that continued through. So we didn't have a lot of people out of work. So that was quite the blessing. But in that we were able to set up, that was kind of the initiation. There was a bit of an assessment, and most of that was a FaceTime call, just to say, all right, what's this going to mean for the next face-to-face visit once we finally get together? But what are you exhibiting? And then you get get to see the movement. And so a bit of a walk here, walk back, and stretch here. You know, where do you exhibit the pain? What are you doing? You know, is it overhead exercises, you know, doing, or a task or something where you're having to bend, or hands and knee work on the floor, whatever that might be. And that was an ability to get that demonstration accomplished almost real time as soon as we were notified about it, to be able to set up that FaceTime evaluation, now telehealth evaluation. And it's all about gathering the info. So yeah, we'll call that telehealth today. So
Well, thank you, panelists. Camille, would you like to add challenges that you see and how you're addressing them, maybe, you know, in the next few minutes?
Yeah, sure. So I just recently moved to Colorado in the midst of COVID back in April. So my position is still fairly new within HEI, very organic in how we're going with it. But for the most part, We do have a flow sheet if we ever have anyone that has a work-related incident. All the calls go to me first. And then from there, I'll go find them in the field somewhere, meet them halfway, and I'll actually evaluate them. So instead of just waiting a couple days or just sending them straight to a doctor, they get evaluated through me first. If it's anything where I think it's minor enough, or even something that's a little more, kind of a little more of a gray area where it's like, yeah, you could see a doctor, or you don't have to, put a little trust in me. You'd be surprised how much stuff can get fixed within 2 weeks. And I've had plenty of successes. Unfortunately, people get hurt every day, and sometimes, you're just unlucky. But for the most part, just having me as a mediator and just saying, hey, put some trust in me, we'll get this fixed, and not even need to see a doctor at all. For most of injuries I've had, I think we had really good relationships with some of our occupational health medicine doctors and urgent cares, especially one where all I have to do is call up, say, hey, I've got someone, I just want to get a quick x-ray on them, make sure that there's nothing broken, and then get them on their way. And most of the time they're willing to bring us in. And for the most part, it's really easy. You got a couple little protocols: wash your hands, get your temperature taken, go through, whatever questions that each doctor's office has, or if you have to call in, for the most part, it's really nothing too bad. But I think just having me around, being able to stop kind of some of the flow and being able to fix it in the field is actually helps quite a bit. I think the only thing where we had some issues, we did have one employee that had to go to the hospital for a very severe knee injury. He was quickly able to get in the ambulance, quickly into the emergency room, quickly get MRIs and such. It was just more so, this was the end of April. So when it was high tide for COVID everywhere, it was just more so his mom wanted to go back there, see him, comfort him. So it's just more those little annoyances. But otherwise, we really haven't had any issues. And, I think it's just great to have a person like me that can fix a lot of this stuff, minor stuff. Doesn't need to go see a doctor for the most part. So,
Thank you. Kevin, do you want to address, you're in a unique situation in that you're serving various clients, so you probably see a lot of different issues, not necessarily directly associated with your employees, but the client employees. And I know that DORN specializes in providing solutions to these type of things. Do you want to kind of address what you're seeing and what's available out there?
Sure. Appreciate it, Jeff. First of all, I want to applaud Craig for reaching out to Lori. I'm a big fan of Lori. We've done some work together, and I think those are the type of programs that prior to COVID, that's who we were and what we do. So I want to talk about what we kind of saw out there. When it first hit in March, we have about 50 some clients and around the country. And a lot of those clients moved from preventative early intervention, and it didn't go away, but it got de-emphasized a little bit. And they moved towards, I need to find PPE, I need to find plexiglass if we're separating space, I need to get all my people working from the office, working at home, and making sure they have tools, the connections, and access to systems that they needed. So the attention and focus really shifted almost overnight in a very dramatic way. In fact, one of our clients was a major airline where we were about to roll out to 10 hubs. Now we don't know if the airline's even going to be in business given the state of that. And so that's the state of a lot of organizations back then. So what they did was they went minimal for a while, and they had the things that Camille talked about and that Craig talked about from when incidents were happening. And I'm sure both Camille and Craig didn't abandon early intervention programs, but they got de-emphasized a little bit. That wasn't the daily focus. The daily focus was getting the PPE and things of that nature. So what happened was, and we talked about it a little bit, the solution about the virtual solutions. What happened was one of our clients that, we were there 60, 70 hours a week in various sites, said, okay, please leave. We got to focus on the health and safety. Plus, all our employees are going home. So there's really not many people here for you all to see and do the early intervention, massage, and biomechanics training that we've talked about. And so then about 3 weeks later, we get the call that says, we got some issues with people working from home. Well, that's because they rushed to put people home because of protection and safety and well-being. And then, so we developed those virtual programs, virtual self-care that we talked about already, virtual ergonomic assessments, the desktop solution, and something that you all, that Craig and Camille are kind of doing virtually themselves. But when you have a mass number of people, we have something we call DORN on the go, which is an app which has all those exercises and conditioning programs so that people can access them based on the job that they're doing. We select and develop that. So I'd say the solution went from on-site to virtual. Now it's a combination. And so the other thing that we saw, and I don't know if many of the people here saw this, when we started, okay, after March and April, everybody's trying to figure out, okay, now we need to start getting back to what we were doing day to day. And what we saw was a lot of people said, we're not having that many recorded injuries or complaints at this point in time. And we did a little research around this. We actually did some surveys. We actually found some information that you have a couple of things that were going on because of the layoffs that were happening every week, over 1 million people or so, and 1.2, 1.3, whatever the numbers were. There were some people who were afraid to raise their hand and say, hey, I had an issue, because they didn't want to be part of that layoff. 2, you had people who rightly so maybe were concerned about going to the doctor. And so they didn't report when maybe they did have an incident. And then 3, you also had people that, and this is probably in a lot of cases what the people who are listening today probably did, was maybe people were more careful, because now it's not, I'm working next to Craig or Camille. It's not just safety as far as I don't want to trip over the materials. I don't want to hurt my back lifting that box. But now I really don't want to be that close to Craig, or I don't want to be that close to Camille. So I'm a little bit more observant of my surrounding. So I think that probably was part of it well. But I think what's happened is there's some pent up issues that are out there. One client that we're in 15 sites across the country, 12 of them went down immediately. So, obviously we leave. 3 of them deemed us critical, similar to, construction was deemed critical. We had a lot of clients say, you all are critical to our operation. So we stayed. But in that case, 12 went down, 3 stayed up. The week before they went down, we had in the 15 sites, somewhere around 7 work-related, 7 to 10. I can't remember the numbers, but it's in that range. After a while, those 12 sites came back up, and it took probably 3-4 weeks before we got back in there, because rightly so, they were rebuilding inventories. They were getting their business model back up and running. The first full week that we were in all 15 sites again, their work-related was 84. It was a pent-up issue from even people who were home, not working, deconditioning, all the things that athletic trainers and other service providers were concerned about was happening, going from 7 to 10 work-related to 84 in 1 week. And so that is something that was happening. So addressing it through the early intervention programs that both Camille and Craig talked about is going to be very critical. And if you don't have that program, learn to look for it, because what we're experiencing now with the surge, not sure, if we're going to have more lockdowns or sites closing for a while, but there's ways to do it in a protective way, to be back on site in a protective way with social distancing or virtual self-care or some of the other programs that don't let it go away. Because we also held a summit of 15, these were vice presidents of EHS. And what came out of that is we actually developed a framework for getting back on site that was beyond injury prevention. It was about workplace safety, facilities, and all those other things. And we can share that. I think I've shared it with Lori and Eileen and Jeff. I may have shared it with you. And feel free to share that with the group. There's no pride of authorship. And in fact, pride of authorship, we coordinated with CDC, ASSP, and National Safety Council We ran it by 15 executive safety people. They added to it. So there's programs, because we're going to get this all under control. We know that. But when you have 130,000 people testing positive yesterday, you got to have those programs still in place, but you can't forget about the early intervention. So it's a balancing act. Those EHS people said, oh yeah, the H part of our EHS went from like 5% to 115% of our time. Well, that subsided a little bit, and now their time is still 115%, but they've, the H part is still a big portion of that. But it's the balancing that has to go on, and more people are getting back to that point of balance. Craig bringing in Lori and Camille coming on board to be that person for her organization. You have to have those systems and processes, and it's pretty important, because you don't want to go from 7 work-related to 84, because you have not only pent-up demand if people were working, if you stop those programs or you ask your third-party provider like us or Lori to leave, but you also had those shops that were shut down, the deconditioning issues that are now going to stop up. And I think I won't call it pent-up demand, but there's pent-up issues that are going to start coming out over the next few months. So those were some of the issues that we saw. And by bringing in virtual solutions, as well as now being back on site with the protocols that we take, as far as masking, gloves, sanitizing in between each person that we work with, those protocols are important to make sure that you can continue your early intervention programs. So hopefully that answers your question, Jeff.
Well, thank you. Thank you very much. We've had a couple of questions put up here, and I'll start with the first one. Does anybody on the panel have experience with third-party medical management consultants? Do they use them? I believe what they do is if you have an employee injury, you call them first and they take over the medical management. I know it's prominent in the oil field, and if anybody could comment on that, we'd appreciate it.
Yeah, I'll take that one. We have 2 partners, and feel free to call them direct. It has nothing to do with DORN. You don't need to go through us. One is called WorkCare. They're out of California. They have the 1-800 triage type numbers, and they're staffed by nurses 24/7, and they can elevate to a doctor. The other one's called Triage Now. They're out of Arizona. They are strictly more nurses 24/7, where they're going to evaluate what the issue is, go home, take some aspirin, go back to work, go see DORN or Lori or whoever it is, those type of things. So those are 2 that are partners of ours that we bring into clients, but feel free to call them directly. You don't need to work through us on that.
Yeah, I've had experience with Axiom, which is a similar type thing as nurses, and it basically sounds like they provide the service that you're doing, Camille. So.
Somewhat. So for me, since I've got the 2 satellite locations, they are much smaller. They're only 2, maybe 300 employees that are actually out in the field. Not quite enough to have a certified athlete trainer there. But if it's an injury where it looks like there's some form of a laceration that doesn't look like it's quite deep enough to need stitches or anything, we'll call Amphibious Medical, and they are staffed with nurses, ambulance workers, and all those, such medical professionals that'll actually come on site. They'll do the evaluation and such. But when it comes to some of the more soft tissue injuries, it just depends on their training. If they've got the training to be able to evaluate orthopedic injuries and say, oh, you definitely strained your quad muscle. And this is how they might give some basic treatment, but then once they're kind of out of that first stage of inflammation, it's calmed down and pain has gotten, to a minimum, then that's where, I like to step in, giving strengthening programs, stretching programs, joint mobilization programs, any kind of programs to help strengthen the area, get it better, faster, all that kind of stuff. So I like having the third parties. I was actually originally part of a third party with ATI Physical Therapy under AWS. And essentially we're just a bunch of athletic trainers that were put at different locations. So before I was in gas construction in New York and doing essentially the same thing I'm doing now, in the field, treating injuries, hopefully preventing injuries, providing education and such, until HEI just said, hey, let's just bring you on full time, build up a program. And now that I work within HEI, I've got a lot more leeway and a lot more possibilities for what's going to come ahead. But no, I do like the third party with the ambulances, especially for my situation, just having the two sister companies that don't have an athletic trainer because they're not quite big enough to have that kind of a workload like I have here, where I've got, 4, 5, 6 different cases every month, people getting hurt that need more than just that initial treatment or that initial evaluation. They need some more follow-ups. And that's kind of my wheelhouse. So, trying to follow up with employees once a week, twice a week, and that sort of thing.
All right, thank you. I had a question for the panel. So, Kevin, you kind of mentioned that people are being a little bit more cautious, maybe a little bit more aware of their work site and their contact with other people. I'd like to ask the panelists if you think that's going to continue once COVID's gone. Once this isn't an unusual situation, are people going to go back to their uncautious ways? And how's that going to affect us?
I hope not. I really hope not. I think it depends on how organizations, and I could let Craig and Camille talk to this a little bit more because we're more on the outside. We provide the training, we provide the guidance, we provide the tools. But, I would say I hope not, because I think if you can change behaviors, people will adapt. People will adapt to the new normal. And if you create that as, look, COVID's kind of sort of under control next year because we have a vaccine and so forth, but we don't know what the next infectious disease is. We don't know what the next issue is. So being more diligent in your communications, your training on these type of issues, I think will keep the awareness. If you keep it aware and it's not just a poster on the wall that becomes white noise, if you're something that you're talking about, it doesn't have to be every month. Maybe it's every 2 months, every 3 months, so that it is fresh information and fresh knowledge. By keeping it aware, I think those behaviors change. I mean, that's what we really do in life. In our business is we're trying to change behaviors, and we usually see a 96% retention of that change behavior 6 months down the road. But I'll turn it over to Craig and Camille because they live it day in and day out versus what I do. But I think it's really about awareness, education, and keeping it top of mind.
Yeah, I'll say that there was a big slowdown in a number of injuries that were occurring almost to the point of non-existent. Part of it was to this, to the world. It was a surreal environment that everybody was living in. I mean, the highways were empty. Nobody was driving. I mean, it was a ghost town out there. Similarly, on the job sites, those that were still active, that it was a lot of less activity going on. So with that being said, there was some caution and maybe a bit of pause that was going into the planning of the day, in addition to getting all the COVID screening and then it was like pretty much wait an hour and then something was going to change coming out from CDC and or your state or local county health departments. So we were all kind of like, what's next? So heads were on a swivel, wondering, waiting. So it seemed like there was a slower, methodical approach to planning your job and executing the job anyway, introduced to some probably reduced personnel, stacking and staging of trades, trying to social distance. So it put a slower pace to the job anyway, one, due to the protocols, two, because it was so surreal. Nobody's experienced this ever before. And secondarily, will that maintain? Well, it hasn't. I can say that. So it was a nice moment, but it was due to so many bizarre things going on. So as some of the work started to break loose, as some of the COVID fatigue started to set in, frustrations, a little bit of the psychology started to come into play. Some of the work pace started to pick up. budgets were being tested, deadlines were being pushed, which meant production needed to really increase as on the construction side, some of our other groups who have been talking since this began, new construction permits halted. So there wasn't any new work, but the work that was still going, inspections weren't occurring. And then if they were, you had to get really creative. So it just slowed the pace down. Then once you finally got it, it was like, go, go, go. So pace did pick up over the course of time. Then in our world, we saw a little bit of mindlessness and lack of planning. So it was like, have we never been in construction? We've never planned our work before. So it was kind of like, we went from one extreme to the opposite other. We did see a little bit of a rash, a bit of an uptick in some cases. Fortunately, we were able to keep those at a conservative care first aid approach through early intervention. One laceration maybe, but anyway, the pace was going from so slow to, I think, back to closer to normal, but it seemed extreme because of that. So it was something different. So Jeff, I wish it would have lasted longer, but in our world it didn't. But we've kind of normalized back to the pace, back to planning our work, back to the, adding in the additional COVID protocols, which those have been ever changing, if you will. So adding more, not really taking many away, but just as far as some of the numbers in some of the workplaces, that those have changed. But they're a resilient group out there. They can be tested, and they've, our groups have been pretty. I think the one cool thing in this whole thing was, because it was so bizarre and surreal, you didn't get the typical pushback and resistance that you normally would with the normal safety approach to, like, when the silica, crystalline silica standards were coming out, there was all kind of reaction. Well, this was like, okay. I mean, it was eyes wide open. What do we need to do? Okay. Really glad to be working. And that was kind of the overall sentiment. So if they were working, they were happy to, implement any protocol that was necessary, as long as they were still active and working. So.
Hey, Jeff.
Yes.
There was a question in the chat box. It wasn't a question, it was more of a request, and it's hard to host and listen. However, whomever was speaking about the link to the self-assessment, self-correction software, who was that?
I think both
Kevin.
Kevin and Camille did.
Okay, Brennan would like to have the link to that software, and if you could put it in the chat bar, that would be wonderful.
Sure.
If not, could you email it to Eileen, and maybe we can put it up on the website?
Yes.
Yeah, I'll get that to Eileen, and you can get that out to everybody. I think that'd be a good way to do it, because it'll reach more people than are on this.
Yes, we can definitely do that. And Brennan, I'm not sure where you are, if you're still on the call. However, we will definitely get that out. Thank you. Sorry, Jeff, wanted to make sure to get that in.
No, that's okay. There was another question about certification and training for what Camille does, and I think she answered that directly. She is a certified athletic trainer, in case anybody missed that. I'm sure there are other nursing qualifications that could also suffice as to what you're doing, or certified physical therapists or things like that. So
Yeah.
yeah, I think it is important that if you're doing what Camille's doing, that you do have that training and certification, because I sure as heck wouldn't want to go out. And do
Yeah.
it.
So,
And the people
well,
probably don't want me to.
I guess that little background for athletic trainers. So you normally see me in a high school or college setting, the person that runs out on the field when there's an athlete down and we drag them off the field. So I went to school for 4 years and got a bachelor's. They're also making it into a master's degree now. So it's 4 years where you're learning all about human anatomy, physiology, how the muscles work, yada, yada, yada. And then they go into how you evaluate an ankle, the knee, the shoulder, the back, the neck, everything. You figure out how to evaluate everything, what injuries you're going to see. So if it's a torn ACL, how do you test to see how if the ACL is torn or if it's still intact? How do you test to see if you tore maybe your bicep or if it's just a strain? So a lot of evaluation that we did. And then we also go through some physical therapy. So for the most part, I could probably do physical therapy on most things. It's just the more complicated things where you do really need a physical therapist. They have doctorates and such, so they kind of deal with more of the messier cases than me. I just do kind of, the easier, quicker cases. But I have, when I was in the college and high school settings, rehab ACLs, I rehab shoulders, rehab hamstrings, and all sorts of stuff. So it is a college degree, so that you have to go through the whole process, internship and such.
Great, thank you. Let's to just start wrapping this up. I think some of the things that I heard today from the panel is that, yeah, COVID impacted things, but there are ways around this. And like the wellness and early intervention programs that always seem to reduce injuries even before COVID are still important. And there are ways to do that remotely through software, through apps, various things like that. Once again, communication with your workers what is still a key, and that always was a key. So that's not that much different. And perhaps the only thing that might be different during COVID is if you're in Colorado, you have designated providers according to your workers' comp programs. So just verify with them that they are still available and still offering all the services, and maybe find out what their procedures and protocols are so you can have that ready during an injury.
Yeah, Jeff, I'm going to interject there on that point. So that actually caused a really beneficial conversation that I had with our first experience after the COVID and the restrictions, some of the reduction in the force and some of the shutdowns. So we actually created a modified company protocol with what they were allowed to accommodate, one with limited face-to-face interaction. So we added 2 or 3 phone and email communication elements, but it was just a good catch up. So they, 1, knew who we were, and 2, we were able to get kind of face-to-face around the issue, still letting them know that we were going to be very proactive and responsive, for any follow-up items that were necessary. But if you've not done that, I would suggest getting back in touch and syncing up with your medical providers for that very indication. If you've been fortunate enough not to have, had any incidents or injuries, good on you. I hope it continues. But the next one that occurs, if this hasn't happened, you'll experience some of, what those challenges were. So better to be prepared for it. So after I realized there some of the limitations and challenges, got on the phone, and it was a really good protocol, kind of a modified protocol in that in this time.
Thanks, Craig. With that, I'd like to thank the panelists, and Eileen, do I need to turn this back to you for some final comments? And
just for a second, this was awesome. I'm glad about everybody I'm really happy about everybody who joins. Any questions, we can forward it to the panelists. If you, hold on, before we leave. Great information, Pat Garland. However, we want to thank Craig, Camille, and Kevin for joining us. And if we were in person, we'd be handing you a little bag. However, your bag will be dropped off, or we'll meet you somewhere. However, we thank you so much. Everybody look forward to the December meeting. We're going to have it up soon. It's unfortunate we can't see everybody. However, our staying home is going to bring the curve down, and hopefully in 2021, we will be able to see everybody's faces right in front of us, which I personally can't wait for. Any last thoughts, panel?
I just want to thank everybody for participating today, and I appreciate the opportunity with you all.
And we appreciate you as well. Craig, Camille?
No, I appreciate the time. Yeah, stay safe.
Be safe. Be safe.
Yeah. Appreciate
Jeff?
it. Any questions, just get with somebody on the panel or get with any, the peers that are, in the group overall. There's a lot of intelligence out there. So we're all on
Absolutely.
the same team.
This group, ASSP, has a ton of intelligence, a ton of research opportunity. So Jeff, thank you so much. You were a great moderator. I really appreciate it. Any last thoughts? You're on mute. Oh, there you go.
Right, head on mute. You get into this protocol now. No last thoughts. I think the panel was excellent. You all brought something unique to the discussion, and thank you very much.
Have a great day, everyone. Stay safe, and hopefully we'll be giving you a call soon just to see how things are going. All right. Thanks, Jeff.
Thank you.